Good afternoon. This is Bob of the team of Bob and Erin. Um, Erin is my daughter. We own and operate the Maine Top Mill, and we are your fiber design Imagineers, which means that we work with all sorts of different fibers that are either qualified for making worsted top or tops that are qualified for us to blend for you. Um, we are located in Waldoboro, Maine, and we utilize repurposed commercial textiles machines from the 70s and 80s. And we have redesigned a servo drafter to become a what we call a duo blender. A duo blending machine basically is able to blend um, protein fibers and cellulose fibers and man-made fibers at the same time. Primarily, my daughter and I started with the goal of what are we going to do to not have to mow our lawn, which is basically 4 acres on our farm, um, other than using a diesel tractor with a mower deck. So Erin and I decided that a good choice would be alpacas. And we did a lot of research, and we were very interested in what's called pre-Incan alpacas, as described by Dr. Jane Wheeler as being totally uniform fibers of basically 4 inch or more staple length with a high curvature and no hair. And that process of finding the right genetics was very, very difficult. But we were able to get to a point where we were working on alpaca fiber that was about 18 microns, but we couldn't get that processed into a fine enough yarn using the Belfast mini mill systems. So we decided, well, we want to see what it would take to take that fiber and turn it into worsted top. Now, worsted top is a processing path which has basically 7 steps of after scouring the wool for picking the wool, opening it up, carding the wool on a worsted card, and it goes then through a pin drafter 3 times. And the pin drafter, what that machine does is it takes the fiber and it gets it aligned and removes the hooks which are created on either end of the fiber as it goes over the various drums from the card. Um, and that is done by using different Fuller bars, which are these like comb-like devices. There are about 72 of them in a pin drafter on the top and the bottom, 36 and 36, that go through not this motion, but the fibers pass through them and they're held back. It then goes into a machine called a rectilinear comb. The combing machine that does work in this type of rotation of pulling the fibers, individual fibers across an apron to make a web that's approximately 14 inches wide. And that machine needs approximately 192 pounds of pin drafted fiber to go into it to produce a type of top ready to be going to the next stages of processing, which are 2 more passes through the pin drafter, since as the fibers go through the rectilinear comb, there are more hooks created on either end of the fibers, and those 2 additional passes removes those hooks, so all the fibers are parallel. Now, the challenge when we were working with alpaca fiber is the alpaca fiber is a very smooth, low scale height fiber with very, very low curvature. So that when you're actually trying to pull or draft that fiber through these machines, they kind of separate. So what we did in our breeding program is that we tried to breed for a vicuña-like fiber on our alpacas so that we'd get about a 60 degrees of curvature. And that enabled us to actually take that raw fiber that we produced and turned it into worsted top to make basically this type of a garment. This is what we call a Cheery Cloud Hollow 80s scarf. It's basically a 318 yarn. It's a weaving yarn. The only downside to what we learned was the cost of processing and literally time, and the amount of waste that's produced was quite high. But it does produce a fiber and a yarn. I don't know if you can see it. There's no hair. This is not a de-haired product. It's totally uniform. It has a nice elasticity. It has a wonderful drape to it, and it's a gorgeous fiber. Again, though, because of the cost of processing, it's very expensive. We then found in North America a sheep breeder, Hele Rambouillet. Hele Rambouillet makes for what we purchased, a 18 micron Rambouillet top, which we actually make in our mill. This is domestic Rambouillet fiber. You can see that it has a lot of elasticity. It has a lot of cohesion as it goes across. And it's hard to see in the sample, but it has a good amount of loft. And as we were working with our textile engineer who helped us develop our processing, we learned that by blending different percentages of this type of highly cohesive fiber, Rambouillet, we add those characteristics to the fiber blends that we make. So what we basically have done is we have commercial processing machines that can do small runs, short runs, of different types of fiber blends, whether you're interested in yak, baby camel, pearl fiber, mint fiber, rose fiber, white Gotland fiber, BFL fiber, into tops that can be made into any type of yarn that you possibly could want. And we partner with different, what we would call developing micro commercial spinners to actually produce these types of yarns for our customers. So what you see on our website are a lot of different types of tops that we have made as prototypes and yarns that we have made from those tops. And as a little segue to the door prize for this event, if you use the word lightspeed in your entry, you'll get 1 ounce of our Sea Storm. Sea Storm is a blend of a dyed gray merino, 19 micron merino, a Rambouillet fiber, and a sparkle nylon. We also did that with a black dyed merino, the same blend. And then we did a combination of the Sea Storm and the Sea Nemesis to make Sea Tempest to make a different type of blend. Now, we also made it using just 18.5 micron merino and the Rambouillet and the sparkle nylon, which we call now Arctis. It was originally called Ecru. And the reason why we made these blends, and these blends are part of the door prize, and just have to use the name Lightspeed when you enter for it, is that these blends, when they're dyed, you get different types of highlights of the colors that you put into it because of the sparkle nylon, the way the merino takes the dye, and the way that the Rambouillet also takes the dye. Other possible uses for the technique of making a light speed type of blend is that we can also use pre-dyed merino tops that are qualified for this process. And that means that the dye tops that we use and the whole can get from a whole range of rainbow of colors have been recombed after being dyed, and that means that there's very little fuzz, they're color fast, and the pigment is almost 99% eliminated from being still in that dyed top. So this type of a blend, one can, as an indie dyer, do a lot of different techniques to get a lot of different color performance out of the eventual yarn or top braid that one would want. Now my daughter did a bunch of dyeing as samples to show how some of our blends work. This is Polworth and our Rambouillet that she dyed with acid dye. Has very, very lovely color. It's very smooth. Almost has no fuzz out. It's very soft. It's retained the fiber characteristics. And when I mean retaining fiber characteristics, when my daughter also happens to be a hand spinner before we started all this, is that buying the commercial top itself was quite difficult to divide because of the way it's processed, and that is not the processing steps, it's that it's processed for production. Production means you're producing thousands of pounds an hour of top at a time. Doesn't really matter what the fiber is, so what you get is basically a very hard top. The 18.5 micron merino that we reprocess now looks like this. It has a lot of elasticity. It has some cohesion. But if you were to start to draft from it, it's very, very easy to draft from the tip. All of our blends, that is the goal. The goal is that you can basically draft right from the tip of the top. It's kind of funny, but yes. Now, besides, this is a Polworth Rambouillet blend. It's another colorway that my daughter did. And another is that you can go and mix and match cellulose fibers into a blend. Now, when we take fiber like flax, and this is flax top, it's kind of doesn't really have very much in it as far as memory, elasticity. The only cohesion is that the fibers are kind of sticking together. But as you can see, as I kind of open this up, all tops are basically webs of fiber. When we take the flax and we mix it with mint fiber and faux cashmere nylon, this is what we get. Now, it's very hard to see, but there's just a little bit more elasticity and memory in this because of adding the faux cashmere nylon. It has a little bit more cohesion going across, but its overall hand is very smooth and very soft, versus the flax is very granular in feeling. It has a nice shine to it, but it doesn't have that really, really nice hand. And the hand comes from when we're blending the fibers, they're passing through the machines enough times so that they blend completely as possible. Now, in fiber design and imagineering, what my daughter does is that she samples the individual the types of fibers going into a blend to determine whether or not they're going to behave well together. And behaving well together is very important because when you take some fibers and you mix them with other fibers, they could have different electrical properties. They can have completely different chemical bonds, which does not allow the fibers to hold together really well. And the idea behind what we do is that we want to make a blend and then eventually a yarn for you that will perform well over time. Now, one of the blends that we make is a blend of Angora rabbit and domestic Rambouillet wool. And we turn that into a DK weight yarn. And it's really hard to see. This is why these festivals are kind of difficult, because this is definitely a tactile experience. But you can see there's very little halo to no halo in this. Plus, it has a very nice bounce to it. Adding Angora and Rambouillet together, you're basically adding some of the two most loftiest fibers around. And this makes a really luxurious type of yarn or top to work with. But it's not a super elastic yarn, but it's really, really gorgeous. Now, some of the other things that we do is we work with BFL. BFL in oatmeal and brown. We blend that together with our domestic Rambouillet, and this is the yarn that we make out of it. And this yarn has a very nice loft to it. It has nice elasticity and memory. That elasticity is coming mostly from the Rambouillet, because the BFL is not a very high curvature wool. Now, when we dye the BFL, acid dyes, it retains a very nice squishiness, elasticity. It takes the dye very well, and the characteristics that we describe in how we feel, how we present our yarns, is that they're cool, even, and they will last quite a while. Now, worsted processing is a process where all the fibers are parallel, so that will make the strongest possible yarn or top. When another color that my daughter did, slight variation of that, and here it is in a clover color. Again, all of these have a cool and even hand to them, and they're quite lovely. Now, going to a very popular blend, a blend that Superfine Yarn has commissioned us to make for them. We make a merino rose for them, and we also make a merino mint for them. This is an example of the merino rose. It also has a lot of bounce and elasticity to it, and it has a little bit of a sheen. Now, some of these cellulose fibers, once they're dyed, actually produce a kind of a pseudo-metallic sheen to them. So it's a lot of fun to get different effects out of the yarn. Another blend that we've made is a baby camel, merino, Rambouillet, and yeah, that's this one. And again, this also has a nice loft to it. If you can see, it's very even. There's virtually no halo whatsoever. The elasticity is there, and when that's that blend. We also do a blend of Rambouillet and light brown yak. Again, the Rambouillet adds, nice bit of loft to it, to the yarn, the blend, and the actual yarn itself has a nice elasticity to it, much more than you would see directly from the yak. Now, yak fiber is fairly short, and the Rambouillet fiber is about 3.5 inches long. But because of the cohesion nature of the Rambouillet, it captures that yak. So when we talk with our customers about what type of effect or what type of end product they want to make, matching the right fibers, the right percentages is very, very important. Now, we can do this in sample runs from 2 to 3 pounds to 30 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 200 pounds, and higher. Although we really prefer to work in what we call full bump loads. A bump is basically 10 kilograms, 22 pounds. So a typical, like a 3-part blend, if someone was to buy 100 skeins, you'd have to actually buy 300 skeins. But that's not the service that we offer. The service we offer is that, as you see on our website, our prices for our yarns have a grayed out manufacturer's suggested retail price, and then they have the sales price, the price that we offer on our website with free shipping. When you look for wholesale pricing, you take the gray price and divide it by 2, and that's the wholesale price of the yarn, to give you some idea. Now, a lot of people talk about superwash process, taking out the elasticity and memory from the fiber. Now, this is our 18.5 micron superwash merino and faux cashmere nylon. Now, this is very, 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 very bouncy. The elasticity, the memory is there. I hope you can see it. A lot of times, the blending material that's used with superwash is fine denier nylon, which is an 18 micron nylon, but it's basically a linear nylon. So it's not going to add any cohesion, it's not going to add any loft, versus faux cashmere nylon, which adds loft, cohesion, and elasticity, and the strength of nylon. So there's no real difference in the strength of using fine denier versus faux cashmere. Now this dyes up really nicely. Again, has a nice bounce to it. No halo. It's smooth and even. This is in a wonderful color my daughter came up with called Connections. I wish you could actually feel it, but it's very, very, very bouncy. Here it is in our puppy love color. Again, very squishy, very bouncy, very elastic. So what we also have done is that we have taken our Rambouillet and we've also taken the Cheery Cloud Hollow 80s and we've made weaving yarns out of them. And as weavers, one of the biggest challenges when we go to do a project is we decide on the pattern that we want to use, and then we say, okay, this is the type of yarn we want to use, and we have to settle for whatever yarn is in the yarn shop or is available commercially, which might not necessarily match the design intent of the finished product. So again, we can do custom blends in 2 to 3 pound increments, which is quite a bit of yarn for weaving or knitting, crocheting, needlepoint, etc. So what we have done with our BFL is that we made a 2/8 weaving yarn. Now, the difference between this and the knit yarn is that because it's basically made for weaving, it has it's a little bit higher twist, little bit stiffer, but it still has elasticity and memory. And we sell this in 4-ounce cones. And as an example of how our 318 Rambouillet yarn comes out, this is a scarf that we had hand woven. It has nice elasticity, very wonderful drape. It's very cool and even. And that's part of what comes out of using worsted top to produce a yarn, is that it should be producing something that is cool and even and has a wonderful hand to it. Now, some fibers like BFL have different textures. Gotland, the white Gotland blends that we make with rose fiber, also has a wonderful hand. But initially, when you take out Gotland, it has a little bit higher scale height. It's a long staple length. But this is when we blend it with rose fiber. It has a little bit of elasticity. It has really, really, really nice cohesion. So when it's spun, it makes a very nice, even yarn with just a touch of a halo, but it's very, very smooth. When we take gray Gotland, and we have blended that with different mulberry silks, you get, a very interesting type of a top that could be made into a very, very cool yarn. Although this is more of a technical fiber to work with for a spinner, because a lot of spinners don't work with gray Gotland. And the reason why I say that, Gotland is a long staple length wool, and it just has a little bit more of a drag to it because of its long staple and the fact that it has this cohesion. So one of the things that's very important when working with a fiber like Gotland, or actually really all tops, is the amount of humidity that is present so that the fibers stay alive and are able to be drafted without shredding. We do a lot of different types of blends. One that's which could be a lot of fun is black diamond bamboo with faux cashmere nylon, and as you can see, you have that wonderful elasticity and memory that does not exist in the bamboo. That's all coming from the faux cashmere nylon. It's a really, really cool blend. We really, really enjoy working with that. I've mentioned the word several times worsted. Worsted actually comes from England. There was something called the Worsted Council. Basically, Edward II was very heavily involved with trying to bring textile manufacturing to England. And they basically set up a set of standards so that they could provide the type of yarns that the Flemish weavers needed. So worsted is a type of process, and the reason why it's kind of identified as a size of yarn is because that was the size of yarn that the commission wanted to have made for these tapestries. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit. So unfortunately, I'm not exactly certain how to answer questions, if anyone has any questions about what we do. Now, one of the things that we have offered people who have semi-worsted rovings, especially some alpaca people, is that by blending in one of our BFL blends, whether it's a white BFL in Rambouillet or an oatmeal or a mixed oatmeal and brown or just a brown, it helps the fibers have the alpaca to hold together better, have a little bit more elasticity and memory. So there are a lot of different techniques of building, quote unquote, the Legos of the fibers together so that they will perform in a way that one is desiring for their project. So now there are also different types of cellulose fibers that we use, and some of those we're developing different types of blends that are antimicrobial, that are healthy and good to use for people that have different allergic conditions. One of the blends that we've made is a C-cell, pearl, and a sparkle nylon. It does not have a lot of elasticity to it because the nature of the fibers that are in it. We could change the Angelina and put the faux cashmere nylon in this to make it more of a bouncy type of blend and elastic. But it's very, very smooth. It's very, very cool. It's very, very even. And we're working, still trying to develop blends that we can use cotton in them. Now, top making, you're all kind of told back in the day that it's for long staple fibers. Woolen is for short staple fibers, and semi-worsted is kind of in the middle. The difference that we run up against is that when you think about cotton is a short staple fiber, but cotton is combed. So it is going through a combing machine or a rectilinear comb. So a short fiber can be combed as a long fiber can be combed. So when some people think that, oh, you can only do long staple length fibers through a comb and you can't do short staple length fibers, that's not necessarily true. Now, I know some of you might ask, do we process other people's raw fibers or fleeces? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, no. And the reason is that the rectilinear comb basically excludes everything that's not within a 3-micron range. And if the fiber isn't strong enough and healthy enough, because the comb, as it pulls the fibers across the apron is doing that on individual fiber basis, they will break if they're not strong enough, which makes more waste. So that is not an ideal situation. Now, we took about 30 pounds of a domestic 18 micron merino wool, extreme high curvature, and we tried to make top out of it. And we got back less than 12 pounds in top. Top was very nice, but the amount of waste and the amount of cleaning, it just was not, it's not practical. So one of the things that we learned when we were raising our alpacas is that in order to have a really good, healthy fiber animal, one has to identify what they're fed, what the minerals they need, what the minerals in the water are, what is in the hay, and we determined with our alpacas that we needed to basically have a very specific mineral mix for them. They were basically dry lotted. They were not allowed to eat outside grass. We gave them, males and females, 2 different types of protein hay. And that's how we were able to make our Cheery Cloud Hollow 80s top to yarns, so that we could make this type of shawl. Now, you know, it's not exactly totally super cool in excuse me, cool in here, but this shawl is very cool and even and very smooth. So it's a lot of what has to happen in order to make really wonderfully performing garments is the use of worsted yarns, and the worsted process allows you to have really, really smooth and even end products. Now, my daughter came up with a really cool knit kit, and basically it's totally reversible. And the cool thing about that is that you're not just restricted to using our black and gray yarns. You can almost use any type of yarns that you want with it. Now, I mentioned to you before, we have our giveaway, our door prize of the 4 different types of lightspeed, a white ecru Arctis, our sea tempest, our sea storm, and our sea nemesis, although this says tempest, a bad label, all based pretty much on either 18.5 micron merino or 19 micron dyed merino. We also made hyperspace. Now, hyperspace is a blend of 14.5 micron merino, Rambouillet, and a sparkle nylon. And this is extremely bouncy and elastic, has really wonderful structure. And unfortunately, you just can't see it well. Maybe you can. It has a wonderful sheen to it, so that it will definitely bring out some really amazing colored highlights. So when we work with our customers to develop a top blend to a yarn, we're really trying to determine what that artist wants that final product to look like. The Sea Nemesis 2.0, we use a different sparkle nylon. It has a much higher degree of shine to it. It's more of a metallic look to it. Again, it has a nice elasticity, a nice squish to it, beautiful color, and very soft and even. Again, virtually no halo on it. Now, when we talk with the mills that we're working with to become micro commercial spinning mills, we talk with them on how they can adapt and change their equipment to do more with it. And some of it is very simple. We just change a motor. So if you change a motor on a machine, like we do with our friends at Rustic Fiberworks, they're able to actually produce for us a 318 weaving yarn. Now, the singles on that are like a single 24 or a single 32, and they're able to do that even though the basic configuration of the Belfast lace spinner is not for that as fine as that. By changing the motor, that gives them a much wider range for processing. So what we kind of offer is the ability for a fiber artist to work with us to make the exact type of blends of tops for the types of yarns exactly to match the products that they want to have, that express their goals. Now, we do blending with mulberry silk. We kind of prefer sometimes to explore the use of fibers like rose fiber and mint fiber, because over the wash processes, those fibers become softer and still retain their color, whereas the silk can become brittle. Although the silk effect is gorgeous, and washing it would be a different type of process. Now we also, from our alpacas that we have alpaca roving that was made at New Ames Farms here in Fiber Mill in Waldoboro, Maine. They made that into roving. These are this is the generation before the cheery Cloud 80s tops were made. They're also very, very uniform. They're very smooth and even. The colors are very rich. What's interesting is if you look on our webpage, you'll see that there's a wide variety of colors that we have. But when we blended them all together, they came up, and this is the yarn. This is the color of the yarn. So that was a really interesting thing to see when we did that. Now, so the fibers that we have currently coming in to be making tops is gray Gotland, white Gotland, BFL, oatmeal, and brown. We have mint fiber, pearl fiber, sea cell fiber coming in. We already have in stock, and we'll be making a whole bunch of 14.5 micron merino and yak blends shortly. But if you have anything that you're interested in, please let us know. It's literally, it's an open palette of what we can do with the fibers. Now, the only tops that we purchase have to come from mills, which are AAA class mills that are environmentally responsible and produce a high quality top. Although those tops still need to be reprocessed by us before we can use them, which means we have to reopen them up, run them through our machines much, much slower, that enables them to blend much more evenly with our fibers. So our blending techniques can either be 100, as close to 90% fully blended to any percentage that you possibly would want, although sometimes it's better to be more fully blended than not. So this is a little 45-minute discussion on what we do. We're custom top makers, blenders, fiber design imagineers that can create almost any type of fiber blend for you and a particular yarn that meets your design intent. So thank you and have a great festival. Bye-bye.